Wow, that sounds loud. The last couple of weeks have been a bit tumultuous, haven't they? You know, one thing, as going through the storm, I realized no matter what house you're in, you're experiencing the same storm, the same emotions, the same feelings. We all went through the foreboding indicators, right, of bad weather coming. We watched for the signs. Would the worst hit, or would we luck out? And then the answer came, the wind and the rain coming in waves, strong and then not, and then stronger and then not, and then strong and strong and strong. At one point, Cosette and I, we thought we could make it out to some friends across town. This is Sunday afternoon. We're like, oh, there was a lull. So we're like, yeah, we can do this. I don't think we got but a mile down the road. And we turned around. The lull had turned into the fury, and the side of the road was already starting to flood. We thought maybe we could make it there, but we probably couldn't make it back, and we wanted the comfort of our own beds. So we turned back around. But the storm, you know, usually your risk isn't so bad. You can have some fun, but this storm I didn't want to gamble with. And then the watching all night. How many stayed up all night to watch it? Yeah, couldn't sleep, right? You tried, but it's like, no. And then it was this fascinating out your window, just fascinating happening. And you're watching to see. It was ominous, it was exciting, it was full of danger and hope and what ifs and doubts. It was hours of wondering, how far would the trees bend before they broke? How much rain pounding could a window take before it caved in? These are things we don't know. And should I let the stray cats that are huddled on my porch inside? Or would they survive the storm on their own? Well, they survived, amazingly. It was really fun. There's one cat, all three, we have a gang of cats, a brood, I don't know what you call them. They all sit, they're all different mixes, and they all come on our little hill there, and they look out on the lake. Side by side, they'll sit right up next to each other. And on this porch, that's where they were. But this one cat just, all of a sudden, he would just dart out into the storm. And I assume he went to go find someplace else. And then 10 minutes later, he would dart back to be with the other cats. And then sure enough, 15 minutes later, he would dart another direction. And he would dart back. And it was, at 3 a.m. You look for those things. It was a long night, wasn't it? More than once through the storm, the thought crossed my mind while I was watching, and the flashes and the whirling and the whipping that was going on outside, I realized, this kind of mirrors personal storms. The personal storms that are inside of us. Those hurricanes of the mind and spirit that we all go through. Full of forebodings and wonderings, watching and waitings of hope and doubt and varying shades of peace for a variety of reasons. And most of the inner hurricanes that we experience have nothing to do with the weather, although with missing family members and friends and not communication, it can certainly become a hurricane of faith. 3 weeks ago, pre-storm, I was preparing for Luke 7. And it was another one of those chapters that you come to where at least 3 of the 4 sections were so familiar, well-known stories offering no more intrigue or insight than I had previously learned years ago. There's the story in Romans 7 of the Roman, of Luke 7, of the Roman whose servant was dying. It's a centurion, and he has his Jewish friends ask Jesus to heal him with just a word. And Jesus is amazed at this man's faith and does it. Then you have the story of the widow whose son died, was being carried out for burial, and Jesus touches the coffin, speaks, and the boy comes back to life. We know these stories. Then you go into John the Baptist in prison asking if Jesus was the one, and then Jesus talking in riddling prose and poetic riddles, and most of which I wasn't sure I really was getting, even after digging into commentaries. And then Mary Magdalene, the famous story of her pouring out her perfume onto Jesus. I read the known stories in preparing Luke 7, and I liked them. They're great, but again, nothing new, no further insight beyond the tried and true lessons. The only section I had question marks on was the middle one with John, the riddles and prose. And so I decided that's where I'd focus, ditch the stories, and focus on that mystery and hope that something would come. Well, just as I landed on some inspiration and insight, about to move forward in writing, a hurricane, Irma, raised her ugly head, and week 1 was gone. Then week 2, Josh was scheduled to speak, right? Well, we didn't have any power. We didn't have any power, and that didn't get restored. And so then we go into 3rd week, which is this week. And I found myself back at Luke 7 once again. But this time, there were remnants of Irma still visible. And I realized my own hurricane was still raging inside. As with all stormy nights and days, especially when they rage on and on, I take that rage to my journal. I talk with God, plead, pray, groan, thank, complain, rant, rage onto my pages to God, giving up, going at it again, over and over, until exhausted and wondering how long until there's direction and peace. I have no doubt that the storm that I was experiencing, you guys have experienced that, not just Irma, but the internal stuff. Whether you're there right now, have been, will be, the repeated swirl of questions that seem unending in whatever situation you're in. What on earth are you doing, God? Why won't you intervene? Help out, clear the skies. The rains of trial and challenge pound and then stop, pound and then stop on our insides, and then they pound and pound and pound, and the wondering whirls on. How far will the financial trees bend before they break? Would the windows of grace hold up for how long? How long before they too would cave in from the realities of this life that sometimes seems stronger than the weakening perseverance that we have and the trusting faith that seems to grow fainter? How long before the end of money? How long before the end of the relationship? How long before the end of deadlines? How long before the end of sanity? How long before the end of caring anymore? How long before the end of hope? The storms inside rage stronger than a hurricane sometimes. And sometimes, instead of hearing God's voice, you get the howling winds and then the endless silence of the center. I was there again this past week, as if a hurricane outside wasn't enough, right? So I went to Luke 7, planning to pick up where I left off, focusing on that middle section of riddles and prose. But something, or shall I say someone, nudged me to read from the beginning again. And so I did. And this week, God's silence broke, giving a word for my storm, and I believe for whatever storm you're going through as well. This word is for you. So Luke 7, you can open it up with your Bible with me. Luke 7. I started reading Luke 7, verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all this in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. There, a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. And that's where I stopped. Or that's where God stopped. Verse 2. That's as far as we got into the story. The centurion there, a centurion's servant whom his master valued highly was sick and about to die. And the question came, Denise, inspire each of you. What do you value highly? What do you value highly that is feeling like it's sick and about to die? What in your life? What in your situation is struggling for breath on its last leg and you're losing hope as you see it deteriorate day by day, week by month? Maybe it keeps you up at night or wakes you early in the morning. I started writing. This question was for me. God stopped me at verse 2. I couldn't even get into the story. Verse 2, Denise, what is it you highly value that you feel is sick and dying? And I started writing. I said, my soul, my mind, there's no peace. I need solutions. I'm tired of the storm without breakthrough. I'm tired of not moving forward. I feel caught in limbo and just want to kick it over and walk away. God didn't let me stop there. He's persisted. I want you to go deeper. When you say you want to kick it over, what's that it for you? What's that it for you? What do you value that's causing your angst? Hearing from you, God. I've been needing answers and direction, and nothing. Competency as a leader, I feel that's kind of dying. Seeing something grow from an idea to vibrant reality, not worrying about bills, financial security, yeah, that feels kind of sick right now. Not failing. And then clear as crystal, I value the idea of a church that is truly living like Jesus. A people passionately going deeper and out to love, serve, and bless. That's a church of joyful relationships, yes, has fun together, but truly makes a dent and a difference in the community, in people's lives, not just in word, but this church in my head stands out and is different than other churches because of this, because of its different focus, its culture, its feel, it's different in its action, collectively seen more than words and dreams, in its commitment to being outside the walls, salt and light where it's needed most. I value vision and passion and hope, and with the hurricane winds not letting up, I feel these struggling to stay alive. I wrote these down. And it was clarity. It's one thing to have the mess, whatever you're struggling with. It's one thing to have the mess up here that keeps going and swirling around and around. But when you put it down on paper, and you take the time to say, what is it I value that I'm struggling with, that's feeling like it's sick or dying? What is it that gives you a place to start to know what you're really dealing with? So what is it for you? When you're really being honest on the inside, what do you value highly that's not doing well? Where are you struggling, wrestling, not having peace? Get to the core, drill down to the central issue. What is that something you value that you feel is about to die? Is it your career? Your job is in jeopardy? The lack of work coming in? Do you feel like that security of a padded bank account, it's just not enough? Are you struggling at the core with faith, the hurricanes, the earthquakes, all that's happening in the world? Where is a God in all of this? Is there a relationship that you value highly that's struggling, or is there a relationship that you wish you had and there's none and you're lonely and you wonder when? Is there a dream or a plan that's eating up time and money but getting nowhere and you're wondering if it will ever become reality? What is it for you? Well, I identified my core. I wrote it down. I encourage you to do the same. And then I kept reading. And suddenly the story that I had been wanting, willing, ready to just set aside because I knew it so well, suddenly became alive and relevant in my life. It wasn't the same old story anymore. I was in the centurion's shoes. And I wanted to know, as if I'd never read it before, what happens next? What is God trying to tell me? What is God trying to tell us? And so I read on. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to him to say to him, "Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That's why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd following, he said, "I tell you, I've not found such great faith, even in Israel." Here's the next. The centurion sends Jews to Jesus, asking him to come and heal what was sick and about to die. The centurion identified what he valued, and then he asked Jesus to come and heal what wasn't right. It's interesting that he sent Jews to Jesus. It says he didn't feel worthy to ask. He didn't deserve Jesus to come. He didn't deserve him to say yes to his request. Where have you felt that? Where in your process are you thinking, I shouldn't even bother to ask God for help because I don't deserve it? I shouldn't even bother to ask God for help because I'm not doing what I should, what I know is right. I shouldn't even bother to ask God for help because I've lost my drive for him, because I've lost my trust in him, because I've lost my faith. I shouldn't even bother to ask God for help because I've messed up so many times, because I'm still struggling with the same thing I asked him for help on before. I shouldn't even bother to ask God for help because I'm still making the same choices that I did before. I'm still struggling with the same sin that I have before. I shouldn't even bother to ask God for help because he knows my situation. He knows what he's doing, and if he's not doing anything, then maybe it's the wrong thing to ask for. I shouldn't even bother to ask God for help because. What's your because? What's your reason for not asking God to come and heal that which is struggling for life in your world? The centurion lays it out. I shouldn't even be asking. I sent Jews who are better connected with you for a maybe chance, but I don't deserve your time. And then we read verse 7. But, say the word, and my servant will be healed. I know if you say the word, this thing that is sick and dying will be healed. In verse 9, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. I have not found such great faith. Trust. What amazed Jesus? What was it that he heard? When he heard this, it says, when he heard this, what part of what he heard? What part made him amazed? Perhaps it was that despite how the man felt, he asked Jesus anyway. Despite how bad the situation was, he asked Jesus anyway. Despite how hopeless it seemed, he asked Jesus anyway. Despite what was clear and known and confusing and impossible, he asked Jesus anyway. Despite how far from being a person that Jesus would even give a second look to, he asked Jesus anyway. And Jesus' response, he was amazed. Amazed at his faith, and he turned what was sick and dying into something well again. He took something that was struggling and made it whole again. He took something gasping for breath and made it breathe again, gave it life and hope and a future once more. Because despite it all, this man kept asking. Despite it all, this man kept trusting. In the middle of these 9 verses, as I'm reading this and I'm journaling, Jesus breathed life back to me. He took the confusion of the storm, the whipping winds of discouragement and pounding questions. And in this, I have this spot, and I have the journal in my office. There's a spot where there's just this chunk of space of page where suddenly there was vision and hope and perseverance, specifically as it relates to Inspire. And I went from not wanting to move forward to saying, okay, God, it's in your hands. Now be assured it's not all resolved. My storm is not all resolved, but God let me know in that moment he is working. He has a handle on my storm, and peace came where I least expected to find it. And he will do the same for you. What is it you highly value that is struggling for life? Despite the everything and the every reason to give up, this story encourages us to not. Do not let those things keep us from asking Jesus to come and to heal whatever and however he deems best. Isaiah 40, 28 through 31 says, do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow weary or tired, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary, and he increases the power of the weak. Even youths who grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. Well, God wasn't done yet. He said, keep reading. And so I did keep reading because I believed God had Luke continue to keep writing and put the very next story about the widow right up next to this one about the centurion for a reason. What if the thing you highly value, that part of your life that you have 100% confidence will last, that part that you know will work out, will always live and breathe? What if the reality that you thought would sustain you, the reality that was as it should be, that everyone else seems to be able to have without issue, what if it wasn't just sick and about to die, but died, stopped, ended? That thing you valued was taken away without hope of ever coming back, of ever returning or being restored to your liking. Let's read Luke 7:11 through 15. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went along with him. As he approached the town gate, a dead person was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the town was with her. When the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." Then he went up and touched the coffin, and those carrying it stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, get up." The dead man sat up and began to talk, and Jesus gave him back to his mother. Now, this is what jumped out to me. The widow's son died. He's being carried out to be buried. He is dead. Here's a situation that couldn't be any worse, couldn't be more done or over, except to put the dirt on top and walk away. But verse 13 says, when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, "Don't cry." And then he touched the coffin and said to the one she valued, "Get up." And Jesus gave him back to his mother. Now please notice, there is nothing of the centurion's faith here. There is no recording of this woman falling at Jesus' feet and saying, "Please bring him back to life. I know one word, one touch, and it will happen." No, he was dead. He was dead. It was over, and there was no more to ask for or to do. She hadn't sought him out like the centurion had. It says Jesus saw her, and he said, and he did. She not only didn't have the faith of the centurion, from all looks, she didn't have any faith at all. Zero. No more hope, no more trying. The time of trusting was over. The time of asking was done. This time of counting on God to do anything anymore was over. He'd been silent. He'd let the chips fall where they lay. He was silent. He didn't intervene. He was silent when she needed him to speak and act and do. And now her son was dead, and she wasn't asking anymore. Have you been there? I have. Quite recently. And maybe you're there now, and like the psalmist in Psalm 69 says, "I'm worn out, calling for help. My throat is parched. My eyes fail, looking for my God." The widow was experiencing loss and darkness of immense magnitude. And when Jesus entered the town gate, she kept walking. But it says, when the Lord saw her, when the Lord, then something happened. When the Lord, then he touched, he spoke, he gave. The same words were used with the centurion. When Jesus heard this, with the widow, when the Lord saw her, when the Lord, then something happens. Do you see the pattern? If the scriptures show us anything, if Jesus' life shows us anything, we see that with every when the Lord, you can expect a then he gave to follow. Always. Even in the places, with the people, in the situations that appear completely locked up, completely done, no life, no breath, no hope. For then and for now, even when you're walking away from the town and the place of what was and starting to face the reality of what will be, when you're facing the reality without, the reality of loss, the reality of a bleak future that begins with dirt tossed on a grave, even then, no matter if the grave is your dreams, the grave of your relationship, the grave of your health, the grave of your success, the grave of your loved one, the grave of your faith, the grave of what you most value, even then, even there, we can expect a when God, then God, and he will give. He will give what we need, what is needed for life to return, to be restored, to be transformed into more than death and darkness. That is never his plan. Even when it looks at loss, he brings beauty out of ashes. He brings purpose and hope out of ashes. Lamentations 3:22 through 26 says, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore, I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him. To the one who seeks him, it is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. When the Lord, then he gave. Of course, questions come immediately. You can't read a passage like that and not have the question, why didn't Jesus send word ahead to heal the widow's son before he died? This is Jesus. He's the one that, could see the disciple from afar sitting underneath a fig tree when he wasn't even in the same region. He could have seen the son from afar struggling to live and done something, or God could have told him to do this for her son. Jesus could have intervened ahead of time. Why didn't he? Why didn't he wait until later? Why didn't he wait until after she buried him like he'd waited for Lazarus? Why did he come when he came? Why did he choose to act then and not earlier, or then, not later? Why then? When the Lord, then he gave. The timing, we don't know. The when, we don't get. Isaiah 55 makes it clear, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. You're not going to understand. The timing, we don't know. The when, we don't get. But the promise of a then, of a God who acts, that we can count on. Habakkuk 2:3 says, the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. And Philippians 4:19 says, my God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. When the Lord, then he gave. When the Lord decides. When God reveals, when God's person, when his presence, when his power enters our reality, our situation, our hearts, our minds, whenever the when is, before we ask, the moment we ask, after we've stopped asking, when God knows it is best and it is time, whether it's because we're ready, or the circumstances are ready, or other factors or people or situations are ready, then God will give just what we need for life. It is a promise. Whatever we need to have life restored again, whatever you need to have purpose restored again, whatever we need for vision to be restored again, God knows. He knows what we need, and he will give it in his right time. Whatever is dead, whatever seems to be without life, whatever seems lost or buried or shut down or seems impossible to get beyond, God will give what's needed for life to be returned. And he knows what the need truly is, whether it's peace or a solution or an encouraging word or a tangible provision of money or job or protection. Whatever it is that you need, wisdom or guidance, a friend, the scripture, strength, courage, rebirth, a new start, he knows. God knows. And when God, then God will give what we need. Psalm 71:20 says, though you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, you will restore my life again. We don't always or ever understand the timing of the when. But if we can trust the then he gave part of God that is proven over and over, perhaps it will help us with our walks to the grave. God sees and he knows. Why the silences? Why the seeming inactions? Why does he not show up in the way we want or expect or wish or think he should before or in the midst of the storms? I don't know. But one thing I do know, like Oprah Winfrey, doesn't she say that? The one thing I know, God is good. God is love. God sees. And when he comes into our lives, into our situations, as we see in these two stories, he acts, he gives, and it will always be about restoring life. I believe in even when we don't get to see him. I believe in when we don't get to hear him or feel him, as the widow and the centurion got to experience. God still sees, and he still comes, acting, giving, and restoring. I think these two stories, what they do is they confirm that we serve and worship a God who loves like this even now. These stories help us know and believe and trust that when we are blind to him, when we are deaf to his ways, when we are stuck in the midst of our humanness and our hurricanes, in faith, we can remember and know he is a God who is not blind. He sees our needs. He is a God who is not deaf. He hears our cries. He is a God who is not stuck. He is acting, and he gives and restores in his time, in his way, making a way for life, for yours, for others, for situations, for the challenges, for his purposes, inside and out. This we can count on and have faith and trust in no matter what. I like how the psalmist's confidence worded it, and I hope for you and I in our lives and for us at Inspire, we too can say, Psalms 27, I remain confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord, because he is good and his mercies endure forever. Amen. Amen.